Hi everybody, how are you doing? Welcome again to our Wednesday Night Live series on the book of Rutger Bregman, which was translated in English as Humankind, a Hopeful History. Last week we discussed Bregman's arguments against the hypotheses of Le Bon. This psychologist argues that when human beings are exposed to extreme and degrading circumstances, they revert to animalistic behavior where dog eats dog. Referring to the bombings of London and Dresden in the Second World War, as well as that of Vietnam, the opposite happened. People became more cooperative and ascended on the ladder of civilized behavior. In addition, I referred to studies of the behavior of inmates in Nazi concentration camps. They support the idea that those in dire circumstances help each other. In tonight's talk, we are engaging the first chapter of Bregman's book, which he titled A New Realism. I call it Stories of Hope, Stories of Despair. In it, Bregman argues for a new, realistic and positive view of human nature. Firstly, a summary of Bregman's view on human nature will be supplied. Then we will review traditional theories in various scientific disciplines of the makeup of human beings, using some of Bregman's examples. Subsequently, we will explore some examples which support Bregman's view. Progressing from that, we will discuss how scientists examine the validity of theories by processes of verification, falsification, and predictive power. However, sometimes we find a blind opposition to reality. Bregman supplies reasons for it. It may be confirmation bias, which is based upon factors like an inborn cynical mentality, which is only open to negative examples, vested interests, which lead to the manufacturing of false supporting examples, and elite panic, which results in the suppression of counterexamples and the creation of fake supporting examples. A skewed version of a theory may also result from self-fulfilling prophecies. Finally, a conclusion is presented. What does Bregman think of human nature? Are we essentially angels or devils? For Bregman, we are basically a mixture of good and evil, with an instinctive preference for the good. This is evident especially in crises situations. We will do better if we adhere to this more positive view that we are prone to behave well. This is supported by nearly every scientific discipline, corroborated by evolution, and confirmed by everyday experiences. He illustrates his view with the well-known parable of the wolf. A grandfather tells his grandchild, "Inside me there are two wolves, a good one and a bad one. The bad one is angry, envious, greedy, evil, and arrogant. The good one is peaceful, loving, kind, humble, honest, and reliable. The same fight is taking place inside you and every other person." The grandson replied, "Which wolf will win?" The wise grandfather simply said, "The one you feed." This is, however, not how people in general and various scientific disciplines view human nature. Bregman illustrates it with an anecdote from Professor Tom Postmus of the Department of Social Psychology in Groningen. He puts his students before the following dilemma. An aeroplane performs an emergency landing and breaks up in 3 pieces. There are fires and smoke. The passengers realize they need to get out. What happens? On planet A, the occupants ask each other if they are okay. Those who need help get priority treatment. People are prepared to put their own lives in danger even for strangers. On planet B, it is everyone for themselves. Chaos erupts. Children, the elderly, the physically challenged are pushed out of the way or even trampled upon. He then asks the question, on which planet do we live? Postmus says probably 97% of his students reply, planet B. In reality, however, we live on planet A. There is an incongruence between how people think others would behave in crisis situations and how they really behave. The answer is the same for liberals and conservatives, rich and poor, educated and uneducated. From first years to postgraduates, from emergency personnel to professional people, all choose for planet B. People believe that in crisis situations, people behave selfish, egotistical, aggressive, and act in their own self-interest. Postmus says the opposite is true. When crises happen, it brings out the best in people. Traditionally, this view, this hypothesis, is supported by an impressive array of scholars. Frans de Waal, a famous Dutch scholar of primates, formed the civilized veneer theory. Essentially, we as human beings are selfish, prone to panic and aggressive. Our basic nature is that of egotism. Names like that of Thucydides, Augustine, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Luther, Calvin, Burke, Bentham, Nietzsche, Freud, and even the American founding fathers support this doctrine. We live on planet B. Even during the Enlightenment, it was argued that we need rationality to overcome our inborn instincts. This viewpoint dominated various scientific disciplines. In the field of biology, Richard Dawkins titled his famous book, The Selfish Gene. Some biologists departed from the most depressing feature of evolution, self-interest and the survival of the fittest. Economists theorized that our economic activities are based upon self-interests and egotism. The founder of political science, Machiavelli, believed that human beings are in essence ungrateful, fickle, and hypocritical. John Adams, one of America's founding fathers, wrote that all people would be tyrants if they could. The psychologist Sigmund Freud declared that we descend from generations of murderers whose love for murder sat in their blood. Environmentalists argue that it is our human nature which causes us to willfully destroy the environment. Modern research in the areas of biology, economy, psychology, and history is proving the traditional hypothesis of human nature wrong. Current evolutionary thinking assumes that our evolution progressed because of our capacity to cooperate, to exercise pro-social behavior together with other people. The following is my own example. 6 million years ago, we shared an ancestor with chimpanzees. They are able to live together in groups of around 80. They have no inhibitions, but are hedonistic and impulsive. They would, for example, defecate into their own hands, masturbate in public, rape a screaming female if the occasion presents itself, steal food from the elderly, ignore the cries of the wounded, and easily resort to violence. When human beings developed the ability of language, it changed things. It helps us to behave in manners which promote cohesion of larger social groups. In India, 1.4 billion people form one country, the largest democracy in the world. Around the year of 2000, the economist Joseph Heinrich and 5 colleagues did some research on 15 small communities spread over 12 countries. They consisted of farmers, nomads, hunters and gatherers. In vain they attempted to confirm the hypothesis of the egocentric and self-interested economic human being. Time and again the research subjects demonstrated sociability and sympathy. I am familiar with the fascinating research of Felix Warneken, professor of psychology at Harvard. He conducted a range of experiments on children. In one test he is hanging towels on a line while an 18-month-old toddler is watching him. He accidentally drops a clothespin on the floor and unsuccessfully reaches for it. Then this happens. The child spontaneously helps him without any instructions from the mother. Warneken's research proves that very young children has an inborn tendency to help others, to share, to cooperate, to behave pro-socially without expecting rewards or being instructed by their parents. They are born virtuous. When the Titanic sank, contrary to what is depicted in the film version, there were no panic or hysteria, no shouts of supreme anxiety or the weak being trampled. This is according to eyewitness accounts researched by historians. The evacuation happened in an orderly fashion. There are thus solid examples from the areas of biology, economy, psychology and history to support the view that human beings have a basic tendency to behave in pro-social ways, not the other way around. Assumptions about the essence of human behavior are tested in various ways. Traditionally, especially from the ever-popular mode of deductive reasoning, only supporting examples are looked for. The dominant activity is called verification. Proponents look for examples to prove their assumptions. The problem, of course, is selective sampling, that is, picking only those which support their biases. Suppose one wants to test the theory that women drivers are bad drivers. You then select only examples which support your viewpoint. The story was told about 20 years ago of the woman who bought a brand new car. She came back after 2 weeks complaining about high petrol consumption. The mechanics fine-tuned the car. She kept returning the car complaining about the same thing. In despair, a mechanic asked her to take him for a drive. She pulled out the choke, hung her handbag on the choke lever and drove off without pushing the choke back in again. Of course, many males use this as an example of the dumb female driver. I was cured of this when our family changed to a new insurer who installed tracking devices in every car. It produced reports about driving behavior. On average, the females in my family came out on top. So much for confirmation bias. Nowadays, scientists do not so much look at examples to verify their theories, but actively search for counterexamples to falsify them. A theory held for many centuries was that in the process of reproduction, the male supplies the most important characteristics of a child. The female only functions like a flower pot. This was overturned in the 19th century when it was established that the father and the mother of the child each supplies exactly 50% of a baby's genetic makeup. Those who believe in the intrinsic evil nature of human beings were surprised at stories emanating from the 9/11 tragedy. The Twin Towers were evacuated in an orderly fashion and people frequently said, you go first. The crisis brought out the best in people. In addition to verification and falsification, scientists also look for predictability. If a theory says the sun rises in the east, then it is predicted that in 5 years' time this will be the case. If it happens, the theory is confirmed. In reality, the process is not always that simple. People cling to wrong theories because of various reasons. Let's explore a few, referring to some of Bregman's examples. The first reason is a cynical mentality which tends to find only negative examples. The story is told of a man who was driving in the countryside and had a puncture. He found that the spare wheel was also flat, and so he walked to the nearest farmhouse to borrow a pump. Being cynical, he told himself that nobody was going to lend him, a stranger, a pump. People are mean. However, he decided to proceed to the house, his head filled with negative ideas. He knocked on the door. A friendly man opened. The man said, "I just came to tell you what you can do with your pump." Bregman calls this attitude negativity bias. When our ancestors, hundreds of thousands of years in the past, were hunters and gatherers, it worked in their favor to be pessimistic. If they ran for life hearing a rustle in the leaves, thinking it was a snake, they survived, even if it was just a mouse. However, if it had been really a snake, they may have died. You normally don't die because of too much anxiety, but you can if you don't have enough of it. When we use Google or Facebook, without our knowledge, computer algorithms collect data about us and put together a profile. They then feed us with advertisements, news and YouTube videos which accord with our profile. The stuff being brought to us by the internet is similarly designed to confirm our negative biases. The researcher George Gerbner calls it the mean world syndrome. In a recent survey, the question was asked of people in 30 different countries. Do you think the world is progressing, regressing, or staying the same? In all countries, from Russia to Canada, from Mexico to Hungary, the overwhelming response was regressing. It is because of the news we are exposed to. News agencies and channels want to sell their product. They look for sensation to do it. And what they dish up functions like a psychological drug, which leads to a misrepresentation of risks, anxiety, negative emotions, and inquired helplessness, hostility towards others, and emotional blunting. It creates this mean world syndrome, the idea that most people only think about themselves, the idea in many individuals that they can't make a difference. They become stressed and depressed. And so we easily remember stories about abductions, murders, rapes, senseless violence, and retell them to others. News is for the soul what sugar is to the body. It brings us a high. Reality is different. Extreme poverty, victims of war, child mortality, crime, hunger, child labor, death caused by natural disasters, and the number of aeroplane crashes have plunged during the past decades. We live in the wealthiest, safest, and healthiest time ever. We don't see this in the news because it is not sensational. The news feeds our cynicism. This then is the first reason we don't want to change our views, an innate cynical mentality. The second reason is that people are so invested in a theory that they manufacture supporting examples. Religious people is infamous for this. A good example is the so-called healer of Nigeria, TB Joshua. He put out a video claiming that he raised a man who had died from a heart attack. The investigative journalist Jacques Pau exposed his fraud. Many pastors manufacture stories of how they heal homosexuals. Each and every story is fake and fraudulent. Sexual orientation is innate, not learned behavior. Bregman refers to August 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. 1,836 people perished. Soon after this, the newspapers reported of atrocities being committed by marauding gangs, rapes, looting, random shootings, even shots fired at a rescue helicopter. In the Superdome Stadium, which was turned into a refugee center, journalists reported that 2 babies had their throats slit and a 7-year-old girl raped and murdered. The chief of police declared the city to be in a state of anarchy. Months later, it was found that the so-called random shootings were actually sounds made by the valve of a gas tank. In the Superdome Stadium, 6 people did die, 4 of natural causes, 1 because of an overdose, and 1 due to suicide. There was not a single report of rape. Looting did occur, but mostly done by groups who cooperated to survive, even with the help of the police. A fleet of boats arrived from so far as Texas to assist in rescuing people. Hundreds of rescue groups were formed. New Orleans confirms the hypothesis that in situations of disaster, people pull together. The free sharing of goods and services develops spontaneously. Sadly, the fake news claimed innocent lives. Soldiers, 72,000 of them, were sent in with live ammunition. At the Danziger Bridge, police shot at 6 innocent Afro-Americans. A teenage boy and a mentally challenged adult were killed. 5 police agents were later condemned to prison terms because of how they handled the situation. The same is happening in the USA right now. Supporters of Donald Trump believe the election was rigged. A story is circulating of an official throwing postal ballots into a wastebasket. It turned out to be the page with the instructions which some voters sent back in their envelopes. Just shows you. These are indeed solid examples of how facts are manufactured to fit in with bias and stereotypes. The researcher Robert Frank found that students taking economy as a subject, when exposed to current economic theories, became more selfish. We become what we teach, he said. People become so entrenched in one specific theory that they lose the capacity to explore counterexamples. Our negativity bias, as well as fake news, cause us to not change our minds. And a third reason why people stick to the notion of the inherent evil nature of human beings is called elite panic. Kings, dictators, presidents, governors, and generals think that ordinary people are egotistic because this is how they are. They are prepared to use naked violence like in New Orleans because they want to prevent something which only plays out in their own fantasy world. It seems to me that Donald Trump is projecting his own character onto the officials counting the votes by accusing them falsely of cheating. Furthermore, it is easier to control people if they themselves think they are worthless. It is typical in domestic violence that a man would tell his female partner that she is fat, ugly, that no other man will ever look at her, that she is useless and can't survive by herself. And this is done in order to exercise control. The dominant partner panics that If the submissive partner realizes their own self-worth, they will lose control. A hopeful image of human nature threatens those in power. It undermines authority. It is dangerous to the state. It implies that we are not egotistical animals that need to be controlled from the top, regulated and trained. Businesses do not need managers and various levels of control. A democracy with involved citizens don't need politicians. We have an inborn negativity bias. There is something like fake and or sensational news and elite panic, which suppress our ability to change our views. This brings us to the phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecies. I mentioned that the theory is tested by its predictive potential. If an economic theory predicts that there would be a recession, and if it happens, it provides evidence for the validity of the theory. However, there is something like self-fulfilling prophecies. If customers falsely believe a bank is going bankrupt and enough of them withdraw their money, the bank will go bust. These prophecies are sometimes fed by prejudices. I remember when I was at university, there were many rumors circulating about Coca-Cola. One of them was that if you put a tooth in a bottle of Coke, it will be dissolved within 24 hours. One of my friends who studied a BSc did an acidity test on the soft drink, and it came out that the rumor was utter nonsense. In 1999, in a school in Bornem, Belgium, 9 children developed mysterious symptoms: headaches, vomiting, and palpitations. The teachers explained it as that all of them drank Coca-Cola during the break. It got into the news, and all over the country, people suddenly developed the same or similar symptoms. Coca-Cola withdrew these products from their shelves. The final cost was more than $200 million. However, when the products were tested, nothing was found that would cause the symptoms. No toxins were present in the blood of the affected. It was labeled mass sociogenic illness. In their minds, people created these symptoms because of a mistrust in bottled cold drinks. In addition to various forms of confirmation bias, self-fulfilling prophecies also cause people not to take leave of their preconceived ideas. In conclusion, we can see that Bregman argues for a more positive view of human nature. We are a mixture of good and evil, but with an overwhelming tendency towards pro-social behavior, towards empathy and cooperation. Examples from the disciplines of biology, economy, psychology, and history are supporting this positive view. Unfortunately, various forms of confirmation bias and self-fulfilling prophecies prevent people from adapting to a more positive outlook. We have an inborn cynicism, and newsmakers cater to this tendency. Some people who have a stake in power even manufacture data to prove their point. Elite panic does the same. Self-fulfilling prophecies have a similar effect. It affects us in a negative way. So perhaps, at the very least, we need to rigorously examine our own prejudices, beliefs, and theories, and open ourselves up to change. We all need a reality check. Thank you.